Welcome to Beginning Calligraphy with Rachel. She's going to teach us tonight all about August and the letter E and some fun things. And I'm going to turn the time over to her now. And I muted her. Oh, you're unmuted. Okay. So let me spotlight you. I got to find you. There we are. Okay.
Okay. How do I sound? Do I have an echo?
Nope, you're good.
Okay, great. All right, so tonight we have the beginning modern calligraphy. We're gonna, some utensils that we're going to be using today would be our Tombow pens. If you have a crayola, get a crayola ready, and also a pencil. A pencil here. So we'll start off with those for the packet as we go through that. And for our newcomers, we can just read the words of encouragement. It says, anyone can hand letter as long as you're willing to practice. Think of lettering as drawing shapes. Lettering is not cursive. While learning this new skill, go slow and controlled. Don't worry about shakiness. In the beginning, focus on each stroke and understand how each letter form is created. So we're gonna move on to page 2, and I did change these packets. And what I want to do is jump right into the strokes and grab any writing utensil as you would like. And the purpose of this is to get a feel of each stroke and get a feel of the writing tool you use. So when we go through the rest of the packet, it makes a lot more sense. So I'm just going to briefly go over each stroke, and I can actually use my Crayola. Okay, and also you can use tracing paper. And I might use that right now. Can you see through that? Or I could just write directly on the page. How's that, Debbie?
We can see it fine.
Okay, so. Oh, I don't like that shadow. Give me a second. Okay, that's better. So calligraphy is broken down into a series of strokes. Our first stroke is our upstroke. It starts from the bottom using the very tip of your pen with light pressure, bottom up. Our second stroke is our downstroke. Start from the top. With the Crayola, you would use a side. Full heavy pressure from top to bottom. Overturn starts on the bottom left. You're going to start with a thin upstroke, light pressure, curve over, and apply heavy pressure once you go over the top. Your underturn stroke starts on the top left with heavy pressure. You want to release just right before the bottom, release pressure, loop back up into light pressure using the tip of your pen. The tricky thing about using Crayolas, you kind of have to move the pen when you're trying to use the very tip, something like that. And then you flex it up onto its point to get a thin upstroke. Next, we have our compound curve. Starts on the bottom left with light pressure, up and over, heavy pressure, release before the bottom, and back up with light pressure. We have our oval. With the oval, we start on the left side. Around 10 o'clock, we go clockwise, starting with light pressure over into heavy pressure, release before the bottom, come backwards with light pressure, and stop where you started. Next, we have our reverse oval. So same thing, start about 2 o'clock, go counterclockwise, light over heavy pressure, release before the bottom, up with light pressure, and connect where you started. Next, we have our ascending loop. Ascending loop actually starts in the middle of the downstroke. With light pressure, you go counterclockwise, down, past where you started with heavy pressure. And then the descending loop starts on the top with heavy pressure, down, reverse, release before the bottom, and stop halfway in the middle of your downstroke. All right, so there we have our basic strokes that create our calligraphy. Next, we will be moving on to page 3 of our workbook. There's not too much to do here, but what I can do is a few alphabet breakdowns, but this page is more for reference. You have your basic strokes here. If you do have this in colored, you might be able to see the or here you could see how it's light and dark. It indicates every time the pen was lifted in between every letter of the alphabet. And here it's an alphabet breakdown. What I like about this is when you're practicing and getting started, have this out during your practice time and projects, and you can again use it as a reference guide. But what I can do right now is just go over a few strokes and show you how you would combine the strokes to create the letters. I'm actually going to reuse my tracing paper here. And for this one, I'm going to grab my smaller brush pen, which is the Tombow. The blue barrel is the hard tip. So common sense, just like the letter A, we have 3 strokes: entrance, stroke, a oval, and an underhand. Combine those 3 strokes, you get the letter A. This is a good practice sheet, and again, using the tracing paper will preserve it. I'd like to go over some of the harder letters you might encounter. We can start with the letter K. Letter K has an entrance stroke, ascending. Doesn't really have a name. It'd be a half compound curve with an extended exit stroke. So here we have an ascending with an extended exit stroke. And here on the letter K, is my way of writing it. And another way of writing it would be adding a loop to the top. The letter R and the letter S are another 2 that can be complicated when you start. I like to, here it shows it broken down. That's why I named it the alphabet breakdown. But like the letter R is consisted of 2 strokes. But in my eyes, when I'm doing projects, it's easier to write it in 1 stroke. So practice as 1 stroke. And that goes for the letter R and for the letter S as well. So you have the letter S in 1 stroke. It looks better that way when you don't lift your pen after every stroke. The letter S also can have different variations. With the loop, without a loop, whatever you prefer. Another one would be the letter M. The letter M and the letter N you definitely want to lift your pen in between every stroke so that you can see the thick and thin. I didn't do that at the beginning. Once I got the hang of it, my M's and N's started looking a lot better. So the M has 2 overturns and 1 compound. And then you want to hide your next stroke behind the previous stroke. So you have with the N, the overturn, and then I start my pen right next to my downstroke. You don't really want to leave a gap. That's a no-no. Overturn, overturn, compound. Another thing I like to point out about learning your alphabets in the beginning, you always want to learn with your entrance strokes and your exit strokes so that you're always prepared for the next letter of your project. Do I have any questions, or would anybody like to throw a letter out they might have questions about in this page? Okay, let's go ahead and move on, but that's how I would recommend this page as a reference guide. Any comments, Debbie, in the comment box?
No, there's not any yet. No one has a question.
That's great. So next, we'll move on to page 4 and understanding the brush lettering basics and understand what we practice at the beginning. So with brush lettering, you want to make sure every time your pen goes towards your body in a downward position, it is always heavy pressure, and that will be your thicker lines. Every time the pen goes in an upward motion away from your body, it is your light pressure, usually entrance strokes and exit strokes. You always want to keep your brush pen at an angle, at a 45-degree angle, not straight up and down. 45-degree angle will give you the thick and thin. You always want to lift your pen right before the bottom so that you don't end up with a soggy bottom, as what we like to call it. If you don't release in enough time, you end up having too much heavy pressure there at the bottom. Releasing right before the bottom allows you to have a more uniform underturn. Crayolas are a lot harder to mess with. But some people do prefer Crayola over any other brand. This here is a Tombow large pen. These are more flexible, might be a little hard, but we do recommend those for beginners. Crayola has more of a hard tip. Next we have, number 4, hold your barrel. If you're having trouble, hold your pen in the middle of the barrel instead of right at the tip. I know, help with the flexibility. So we're going to speak about faux calligraphy. Faux calligraphy can be useful for multiple reasons. One, you can create it when you do not have a flexible pen and you only have a pen, pencil, or you're doing special projects that you can only use a Sharpie oil pen or a chalk marker. So you would create faux calligraphy to make it look like calligraphy. You can purposely make calligraphy and leave it open to add colors and embellishments, doodles, or even flowers, watercolor. Also, learning faux calligraphy at the beginning can teach you where the thick and thin strokes are in every letter. So let's demonstrate how we would create faux calligraphy. So I'm going to use a non-flexible pen. And then I'll also demonstrate it in a pencil. So we're going to just draw the word hi. And I also keep my basic strokes in mind. You would add your second line to every downstroke and then fill it in. I'm going to use a pencil. I like to continue to follow through the strokes, because if you just stop, you might end up with little flicks, little feather-like where you lift your pen. Also, like I mentioned, you can leave it open to add embellishments, or in this case, I'm just going to add some color. So if you're just doing a special project for this exact reason. All right, I think that covers our basic faux calligraphy. Any questions before I move on?
There's nothing in the chat box.
All right, perfect.
And feel free, guys, to unmute yourself if you have a question.
Okay, so I came up with this new page, which is our number 5.
I'm slow on muting.
Okay, question?
Yeah, on the, when you do the second line,
Okay.
like on the I, does it go on the inside or the outside?
We're talking about faux calligraphy?
Right.
When you fill it in, I would just say it goes centered. There's not a specific area.
I mean, like,
okay, I know what you're saying. I did it on the right side. Every downstroke, every second line, I was drawing it on the right side.
okay.
So let me just, I'll demonstrate it again. Let me do it bigger.
I was looking at what I was doing and not what you were doing. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. No, that makes perfect sense. So what let me just do it bigger. You know, I have a bigger black pen as well. Okay. So let's do it the first way, where I would just draw the whole word. And then here, it's okay if I cross over because it gets all filled in. So then here, fill this in, and then go over to the right side, and then I follow through until I no longer see my until it actually looks like I'm drawing directly over the line.
Okay. When I did it the other way, and it did not look good.
Oh, doing the line on the left side?
On the left. Yeah.
Okay. And, oh, yeah, it also comes with practice, because I'm sure you can do it that way. Oh, I see here on the left side.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense. No, you're right.
It doesn't look good.
As
This
filled
is my very
in.
first class. I'm sorry.
No, that's why we have our beginner class, for this exact reason.
But
okay.
I will
And
keep
so,
it to the right.
Now that's usually, Terry.
Yeah.
Rachel, you should mention that sometimes when you're doing a whole word, that you've squished your letters together in places. And so sometimes you will go on the opposite side just to make the downstroke. Yeah, make the downstroke evenly spaced across your letters. So there is that, like do a 3 or 4 letter word, Rachel, and do 2 letters in the middle close together, and then show her what I mean. That, you know, sometimes you have to change it up a little bit.
So
let's do the word right.
Watch you and not.
Yeah, just do the right. Just do the word right.
So you're speaking about just spacing it out completely like this?
Yeah, and if you've put 2 closer together, then you would not always go on the right hand side when you do the faux part. You know what I mean?
So like the letter T.
Can you move over, please?
Oh,
you're off the
screen.
Thank you.
There you go. Okay. So like here's what you're, or maybe, oh, okay. So here's a good example. The letter E, you can actually go on the left side so that you don't lose space here. That's one example.
And then the space between the I, T, and E look pretty much the same. The space.
So in order to balance it out, she's saying go on the left side instead of the inside. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's what I was just saying, that, you know, sometimes you'll not write it correctly, but
Not
then
always
you can kind of rebalance it by depending on what side you put it on.
Right, because it's always hard. I could sit here and say, well, make sure you space it out perfectly enough, but it's never always like that. And we know that from last month's chalkboard class.
That's right. Yeah.
Any more questions?
Okay. Oh, there's another person that's their first time too. So, Araceli, I don't know if that's how you say her name. Welcome, all you new people. And you can take Rachel's class over and over and over and over again, because that's how you get better at it.
All right, so next we're going to move on to page 4. Page 4 is a new addition to our workbook. And what I want to do here is, like I mentioned, alphabet drill, and I'm going to use 4 different writing tools.
It's actually page 5, Rachel.
Oh, I'm sorry, page 5. We're just on page 4. I'm sorry, that's right. Okay, and here what I'm going to demonstrate, how I made my alphabet drills. I created the full alphabet, A through Z, starting with the letter A. I did A, B, A, C. I went from A all the way through Z. And then my next page, I did the letter B. So letter B, letter BA, BB, BC, all the way to Z. So since this month is the letter E, I'm going to continue on that pattern. I had to add it into the packet because I kept forgetting to show you my alphabet drills. And I'm going to use different utensils for each line. And then, but again, the reason I'm showing you is just to show you different ways, different tools to use. But if you just have one writing tool, you can use it for the whole drill. If you don't go through your whole alphabet today, you can use it, fill it up another time. But what I was speaking about was, so letter E of the month, start with the letter E and then go to the letter A. Letter E and B. So the second letter is the alphabet. The first letter stays the same. Every time I write the letter E, it's never coming out. I'm never writing it the same because that's part of my practice. Every time I do a new set, I want to kind of try it a different way. 1 second, please. Does that make sense, Debbie?
Yeah, it does. You're experimenting with your loop.
Experimenting. I'm sorry. Yes. So for example, okay. Letter E. So here I would write, this is how I would teach the letter E. Write a C, go backwards, and connect it for a perfect open space. But then I want to experiment and write it in full. And exactly what she said, play around with it and see what's more comfortable for you. Okay, so then of course, if you're using just one utensil, you go to the very end, fill it up, and then continue on. But for the sake of class, I'm gonna use a different tool just to show you the writing style. So from E, we have this is just a fun way to get some practice drills in. Okay, and again, I would normally fill it up, but I just don't want to spend too much time. Another way of doing calligraphy is using the pencil as heavy and light. So on my on my upstrokes, I would use light pressure. And when I would do down, I would apply pressure. So same thing as if I was using a flexible tip like I did on the first row. But I would just apply more pressure and then release. And it shows, instead of thick and thin, it shows dark and light. If you try practicing your whole alphabet with the pencil and then directly pick up a flexible pen, you'll see a big improvement. Because even though we are using a flexible tip, you still want to apply pressure. The flexible tips are made for full force. But see, with the pencil, we're just, when we apply pressure, it just gets darker, it doesn't flex. And then if you just want to do your alphabet and all full calligraphy. like to leave a little space just to leave it open. And I don't see the cross strokes. You can do it at the moment. So here, because I choose to leave it open, I draw the second line, but I'll show an example if I were not to leave it open. So I would draw it all out. So here, that's an example, Debbie. Since I didn't want to take up too much space on the right side, I did the line on the left side.
Yes, yeah.
So I highly encourage you to grab any writing utensil of your choice and do your alphabet drill, make a copy of this page, get your own type of guidelines, and I challenge you to go through the whole entire alphabet. So that's how my drills go. And I'm not asking y'all to finish it now because we have so much more going on. You can finish it later, but we're going to move on to our worksheet. But before, do we have any questions?
Rachel, are you going to talk about 6 and 7, or did you already do that?
No, okay, 6 and 7 come at the end. I like to go over it, kind of like a recap.
Okay.
Sorry, I should mention that.
Actually, it's 6, 7, and 8. Yep.
Yes. Okay. So yeah, 6, 7, and 8 will be a recap and recommendations, and I know number 8 is more of a takeaway. Okay. So for this one, I'm gonna just stick with the Tombow, but you can use any writing utensil of your choice. Again, crayola, pencil, just as I demonstrated on the alphabet drills. So for, again, I mentioned the month of August, we have the letter E. We have our copper plate letter E. It's in 2 strokes. When I practice, when I learn my copper plate, it's usually, this first stroke is usually broken down into 2, but I learned it's easier to draw it as 1 stroke. If that makes sense. See that there? And then you add your bottom half. It's like the letter C with the hook. And when you combine both of them, so it's an entrance and a loop combined with the bottom half, like a letter C with the little hook. Let's go ahead and do that one more time.
Hey, Rachel, would you say that bottom C takes up the whole X height? Or is it above it?
It actually goes all the way below. It takes up that whole area.
But but does it go above that midline a little bit?
Oh, you're right. Okay, I see what you're saying. Okay, here is where the dots are supposed to be, and yes. So it takes up that whole top portion.
Okay.
I think from now on, I might have to use these lines so this doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Right. Yep, that's correct. Uses the whole top portion. Okay, next we have our lowercase, which we practiced in the last page. Well, here I demonstrated it with 3 strokes. We have our entrance, write it like the letter C with an exit stroke, and then hook it back left to connect and gives the proper spacing. Just 1 second, Debbie. I'm gonna remove the baby from my room. I'm sorry. He found his way in. Okay. So next,
hang on. Terry's asking if we could see some capital letters. We'll see that on our last page that Rachel will go over later on page 8. There's capital letters.
yeah, with the beginning calligraphy class, I like to just focus mainly on lowercase, because uppercase copper plate is a whole new world, a whole new class of learning. So that's why I create this worksheet, so we could just focus on one letter at a time. Okay. So next we have the bounce. Bounce is usually below the X height. And here I drew it in 1 stroke, just because I had a little tail at the beginning. So I want to make sure it goes big enough so they could look like the letter E. That's more like it. So kind of think of it as, instead of rounded this way, kind of keep it close, like a letter V. I want to keep the letter V motion opposed to more of a, you don't want that. You want to keep that in mind. So we have E and then hook it back up. That's how you do bounce lettering when it's below the X height. It makes a lot more sense when it's in a word. Next we have the letter E. I'm going to pick up a non-flexible tip. I'm saying letter E in faux calligraphy. And here with the letter E, leave an open space, and then I add the entrance stroke. Our project is consisting with the word hello multiple times, so I just threw it here in the worksheet to practice. All right, so our next portion is the word August, drawn in different forms. I'm going to start off with our basic form, which actually has 9 strokes. Can't see that too well. Here is a funny, this is actually a reverse compound curve. So it starts with a heavy downstroke back up into almost a double reverse compound curve So what I'm demonstrating here is there's sometimes you don't necessarily have to lift your pen in order to create a flawless stroke. So for example, like here, because this letter S is next, it wouldn't look so great if I were to stop there and then try to pick up where I left off. So naturally, just keep going with the flow until you find a moment to lift your pen. And that's what happened with this one, how it ended up being a reverse compound curve. Because if you were to lift your pen in this area, it would be slightly off. And doing the alphabet drills, you get to see every weird combination, and that's when you kind of learn what works and doesn't work. So here, August is written below the X height. I added a bounce up and below the X height on different areas. When you do bounce lettering and also flourishing, you want to start off with your base word here. Sketch it out with the pencil if you can, and then go and add, see the V motion that I mentioned? Start off with your base word here, and then go back and add your bounce lettering. Because with bounce, there's no rules. Depending on each word you do, the bounce is going to be in a different area. The whole idea of bounce is making it look balanced. You know, I wouldn't do a double drop back to back 3 times here. That's why you see it every other bounce or so. Like here, I didn't add an extreme bounce here because I wanted my bounce to go on the letter S. But again, it all starts with writing it straight out. So that's what I demonstrated here on the flourished August. I did it in 2 colors so that you can see specifically where I added the flourishes. So let's start off by writing just August. Start here on the left side with light pressure and then a heavy downstroke. Across the letter A. Here I disconnected these just to, so here I'm gonna just stop right there so we can add the flourish after. I disconnected these just for looks. So here, went back and with no pressure, just added a loop. Here, added a loop to the letter G. Oh, that didn't go as planned. And with the letter T, I actually started from the T, went backwards, looped it through. That's how I got that loop there. With flourishes, they're more in, just like this one. Let me demonstrate the letter G again. They're more in an oval shape. That looks kind of circle. Didn't demonstrate that one too well. But what I'm saying is they're more in this shapes, not so much a perfect circle. Right next, I have the letter. I'm sorry, calligraphy in August. When I do big loops, I like to just go back over it and then add the second line with never lifting my pen. So here, since I left it open, it's more of drawing the calligraphy, but if I were to fill it in, of course, you wouldn't worry about lifting your pen and drawing it as much as I did right now. Okay, so next we have August in the expanded form. So with the expanded form, you're just making expanded entrance and exit strokes. So start far off to the left and expand your exit. Expand to enough spacing in between each letter. This one's tricky. Okay. And then August, here it's in block letters, so same thing. Every upstroke is light, thin, and every downstroke is heavy pressure, the thicker side. So up and then down, thicker. Start on the left side, be thick on the left. I don't think black on black was a good idea. Should use a different color next time.
So we have a couple of questions, Rachel.
All right, go ahead.
So they were asking, the first stroke on the lowercase e doesn't go smoothly into the rest of the letter. So I'm assuming she means the entry stroke. Can you show them how to do it all in one stroke when they get the hang of it?
So just our lowercase e?
Yes, yeah. Okay. So can you show her how you do the entry stroke and then you go straight across to the E? You know, there's that little jog if you were to do it all in one stroke.
Okay, so without making it in 3 strokes.
Right.
So we have our entrance and then kind of start really close to here. And what's gonna happen is when you loop it around, you're gonna hide, excuse me, you're supposed to hide where your pen started. So, I mean, it doesn't even have to go that high. You can just,
I usually don't take it that high.
Okay, so just a little entrance, maybe a small gap. That right there, that's a lot better.
Yeah.
There you go. So maybe halfway.
Yeah, it's not a very smooth transition right there.
No, so then that's why we resort to the letter C. So you focus more on that downstroke there. And then come back. Also, you know, just because you're using a flexible pen doesn't mean that's the way it has to stay. That's why when you learn full calligraphy, you go back and add a second line to make it to your liking. This is modern calligraphy. There's no perfect way to do it. That's why I mentioned it's like drawing. And you're making it look the way you want it to look.
And then someone else asked what the different names of the letter styles are. And besides copperplate, and the reason we focus on copperplate is it's so close to faux calligraphy.
Was she asking about these styles?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Why don't you just go over those styles again?
Okay. But yeah, like you mentioned, this is what we call copperplate. All our uppercase would be just basic copperplate, I'm sorry. So here we have our basic lowercase calligraphy. Here we have bounce, flourish, faux calligraphy, expanded form, and block. Block or capitals, caps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then regular formal calligraphy has all your different styles, like Roman and Italian and Unical and
yeah, classic calligraphy. That's when the rules are applied. Yeah. There's so many. That's a whole new world. But this is modern calligraphy.
And so that's why we focus. You know, there's script, but truly the flourishes and everything that you would use in brush lettering would be through the same as copperplate. And page 8, when she goes to that one, is copperplate. She'll show you.
Right, at the very end. Any other questions? Okay, so here's a fun little project. Move on from learning. I bet your brain is pumping with all this information. Here, I actually created it on mixed media paper. If you have mixed media, anything smooth. This is these are different title headers. You can use it on your bullet journaling. What else? I mean, you could do a full project with it. I'm actually going to show y'all a project after this. Or how much time do we have? Debbie, what time is it? Oh, okay, about 30 minutes.
7 o'clock. You could use it for greeting cards.
Okay, also. What I'm going to show you after this, because these are just samples of how you can, different ways to write your titles. I'm going to actually show you more of a cool project that you can probably frame and give as a gift, even write it on wood after we go through these. Let me see. So if you have, like I said, just a smooth piece of paper, or here I'm going to demonstrate with mixed media. What I did was I made 4 sections. So I folded it halfway and long. Gave myself 4 sections to work with. However you like to work, you can actually write it straight across, or in my demonstration, I just did it at an angle. Tape it down a little bit. Okay, so for our first one, I used a non-flexible tip. And I started by writing hello first, capital. So this is not going to give me a thick or thin. It's just going to give me a basic capital formation. I'm writing it taller than normal. Okay, if you need to allow it to dry a little bit. Let me see. And then grab a different color And what you're gonna focus on, so here, actually, we're gonna see it on this whole entire sheet, the expanded form. So every time I move on to my next letter, I'm prepared to extend it. And what my goal is to get that letter lined up, kind of sort of centered with each letter. So I started with an extended entrance. I went through my letter H, gave it a little bounce, got ready to extend, and I lifted. Letter E, extend, lift. Get ready to extend and put it in the center. And then an extended exit stroke. That's one way. This next way I actually used, oh, well, let me use a Crayola in this one, but for the sheet that I did, I actually used a Tombow pen. But since I know a lot of us have Crayolas at home, we can definitely use the Crayola for this one. So this is calligraphy style, thick and thin, lowercase. So start with the hello, thin, thick, and then we're spacing them out. We're not letting them touch. See, so I was able to create the thick and thin just using our Crayola. Give it a little test, make sure, see how, oh, there's a little spread there. Gonna wait a little bit for it to dry. If you want, depending on what you're using, we can let that dry and then move on to this square. That's what I had to do yesterday. So in order to create the empty space on this one, I actually use, well, in that specific one, because that's all I had at the moment, I use painter's tape. If you decide to use painter's tape, or actually painter's tape or washi, I would highly recommend sticking it to either a table runner, something nearby, or just your shirt or jeans to release the tackiness, because it will pick up, remove your paper. So I'm gonna demonstrate it with the washi tape. Put it here on my clothing. Lift it, just on and off, and then place it where you would like. And with this, you're gonna start with, it's gonna be the same hello as I did over here. Or if you like, you could do capital. Can you see that there? Let me move it up a little bit. So here you can even go and add a second line just to make it thicker. Okay, so with the E, let's do the letter C. And what you want to do, normally you would probably put your loop right here, but you want it to go below your tape just so that when we lift the tape, it still looks like a letter E. I think I like to add the second line just because, again, when we remove the tape, it starts looking not so thick. Oh, I ran out of tape space. Okay. Okay. All right, so let that dry. I'm gonna move back here. You don't want to move on to this bottom because then you don't want to smudge this, because I did do that already as well. And then here we're going to, since this hello is calligraphy, I figured we would do, well, it's cursive, but of course I kept the calligraphy strokes in mind. Same thing as the first one. You want your entrance stroke to be expanded, and every time you move, every time you do your exit stroke, you expand it to the middle of the second letter. So here we go. Okay. Let's remove the tape from this one. Hopefully it's dry now. Okay. Now, if you have a ruler or a hard edge, we're gonna need it for this one. Let me do a little. All right, that one's dry. So I'm gonna line it up as close as possible to the edge where our washi tape was. And I'm actually gonna extend it past the word hello. Okay. And then the same thing for this. So you can do calligraphy or just write it out. Let me do calligraphy for this one, switch it up a little bit. So we can do double calligraphy. Ooh, this one's a far extended one. So that's actually demonstrating calligraphy on calligraphy. Okay, and then our last one is a capital hello. Now my cross strokes are thin. Apply pressure. Let that dry a little bit. And then just write the word hello like we did in the second box. You want to also keep in mind, if you got to make your letter E slightly smaller, just so that you don't end up with 3 letter E's or 3 letter L's. So you can make your letter E just slightly small and your letter L slightly larger, just for the sake of the project. But that's project number 1. I have project number 2. I wasn't able to get it to Debbie in time, but before we move on to that, do we have any questions about this little project? Was everybody able to get it done?
I think everybody's good. One thing that I found is that it's hard to do a heavy downstroke when you're thinking about how long you have to extend it out. So I've been going back over my downstrokes to make them thicker.
Oh, okay.
That might that might just be me, or you guys might have that trouble too, but just know that you can always go back and thicken up your downstrokes.
Okay, I get it. I had to actually apply extreme pressure with using my crayola. So I get it. It took quite a bit of pressure to get that as thick as I did. Another thing, I mean, this is just a quick warm up, but I would recommend even just sketching it out. If you're getting a pencil and
smile at mommy. Look at me. I can't see your face. All right, forget it.
Okay. We can move on. This is what I came up with for to take away from what we just learned. Created a sheet that I call Knockout, and you can actually create one for your mom, one for grandma, putting grandma's name. I'm thinking if grandma has multiple children, maybe filling up, and this is on paper, so if you're thinking about doing a woodwork or chalkboard, of course you have so much more room to work with, but even if you have to do 2 lines on a bigger scale where there's enough room to write grandma, and then if you need it, if not, grandma is long, so you can probably fit all the names, just depending on how many grandbabies there are. Another way of doing it is now that I went through that other project, this could have easily been calligraphy capital as well, but then it takes away from the calligraphy in the middle. Another way you can do it is actually putting wife. I've seen it where you do wife and then writing your husband's name in the middle. Just cute little project. So I'm gonna walk you through this one. Again, it could be done on mixed media paper or just plain paper using markers. So for the mom that I just showed, what I did was found my center marking first. So for my mixed media, actually I started this way. If you want, you can fold the page. Don't apply too much pressure because you want to go back and be able to erase. I did it so far down, but more or less the center part. And the reason for that is so you know, and in this case, I'm going to use painter's tape. Again, get it the size of your paper, put it on a piece of material to remove the tackiness. And what I did was kind of lined it up with my pencil marking and then went above that and covered it. That's kind of where I found my centerpiece. So if you were to do this on again, a bigger scale, I would highly recommend maybe using 2 painter tapes, 2 rolls of painter tape, or if you're doing it on a smaller scale like a card using washi tape. All right. That's why I did it. Sorry, back it up one step. I want to see where my center mark is here in the middle, because that's going to determine where I place my letter O for mom. So in this one, I would like to sketch out the O first. Kind of, I should do it darker, right, Debbie?
Yeah,
Just
I can't see it.
show.
Yep.
All right. But don't do it to your page. Make sure you sketch it because you do not want it to stain your project. Okay. And then mom, I was able to do the lowercase letter M. If you choose to do this after class, I would highly recommend using a pencil, sketching, erasing, finding the right placement. Since I've already done this a few times, I kind of know more or less what size I'm going for. And when I draw it, I'm gonna correct it as I draw it with the marker. But again, I highly recommend spend more time on your sketching and placement, especially if you're gonna do grandma or a longer, bigger name. So just as we did in the practice. So here I did double lines. Actually, I used a different pen, but I'm showing you with the Tombow. I forgot, I used a different. I used water, pre-filled water brush pen. So you can even use your watercolors with this project. Here I'm using the Tombow since it has a more big flexible tip. And again, you can use your crayola and just add a second line. What would be cool is you can actually do faux calligraphy and fill it in with different watercolors. So many different ways to do this project. I usually like to wait if I have, well, there's two times you can erase your pencil markings, either before you start doing marker or at the very end. Once everything is said and done, you can go and erase all your pencil markings. But then you also want to make sure everything's dry enough. So that's why when you're doing it by yourself, don't do it too dark. I just do it so you can see it here in class. Okay, and same thing, grab the ruler, line it up as close as you can. And then I actually did calligraphy on this project. Can get the whole word in there. Okay. So in this situation, I'm going to actually write the word in regular calligraphy and then extend the last letter. So as I'm getting to my last formation, you want to just always keep it in mind. Don't lift you, because I naturally wanted to lift right about here, but just keep going. You can also sketch it out so you have the right placement. So I'm just going to go ahead and go for it. So right here, I got to put it in my mind that I'm going to extend it. And then I actually did a capital letter. I started with a lowercase for the second name, but I just wasn't liking the way it looked. So here comes my extended. And extend. Oh, can't see that too well, but there we go. I'm not going to go through this one just because I want to go through the last few pages of our workbook, but this was just another example of ways to do it. But then again, refer to our hello page and make it your own. Again, using wife, husband, grandma, grandpa, mom, or dad. And on this one, like I mentioned, I was able to use pre-filled watercolor brush. And I actually like the way it came out, but I wanted to show you in class with marker because not everybody has those pens. And I know most of us start off with crayola. Any questions? What did y'all think about that little project? How did yours come out, Debbie?
You're going to go through the you're going to go
6,
through the
7, 8.
pens. Here's mine.
Yes.
I did grandma with only half of my kids' names on there.
Yeah. I can see it.
Oh yeah, maybe I need to pin mine. Hold on. Let me pin my video. There we go. You see it?
I see it.
Yeah. Okay.
Looks good. I like it, Debbie. See, and then, of course, if you were to make it on a bigger scale or maybe go long ways, you can fit more names.
Yeah, I needed to fit 10 more or 5 more names.
Oh, no. Well, still, like I said, maybe doing double lines.
Sorry, I would have had to have gone this way, or like
Yeah.
you said, do double lines through it.
Right.
That would have worked.
I've seen one. Okay, so just like this. So maybe do grandma like this, and then you do 2 lines of just calligraphy. So where you can put grandma, do grandma so that it fits, and then just do, without getting rid of any space, just write 2 lines of names.
In the one big space. Like I would use masking tape or something, or
Well,
painter's
no, that's
tape.
what I'm saying. Don't even, because here I wrote directly on.
Oh, that's true. You wrote, yeah. Don't block it out.
There you go. Don't block it out. Just write directly over it. And that's why I chose to do thin, or, you know, one line, monoline, so that the calligraphy doesn't interfere with.
So the names show up better. Yeah.
There you go. So the names show up on the small calligraphy.
I like it.
Thank you. Okay, so next we're going to move on to page 6, 7, and 8. We'll go through these briefly. They're just some recommendations and information to provide. So number 6, I'm just explaining here that everything we learned in class has different guidelines. So once you get through your basics, you end up learning guidelines. What guidelines work best for you? Wow, this didn't come out the way I had it. I might have to make it brighter, Debbie. I'm gonna pull out my original so that my words match the sheet. I might have, when I scan it in, I can make it brighter. Maybe I might have to give you the original to make it brighter. And then we could resend it to class. So again, once you go through your basics, you're gonna try to find your style. And in order to find your style, you wanna find the right guideline that fits you. If you're gonna be working with small brush pens, if you're gonna work with large brush pens, if you like more of a up and down type of style, or if you wanna see your calligraphy in a slanted style. So to start, our guidelines have names. So I'll show an example right here. The top line would be our ascender line. So we have here. Our second line is our waistline. Third line is our baseline. And the bottom is our descender. So anything in between the waistline and baseline is what we call the X height. So between the waist and the base, X height, that's where you're going to see where all your main body of your letters are formed would be in the X height. Different guideline examples. We have our basic beginner. See that there? Our basic beginner.
Rachel, when you describe those, will you tell which kind of pens work best for those different sizes? Someone wants to know what a Tombow is, and when would you use a Tombow versus a smaller pen? So explain that pen too.
That's perfect. So right, I was gonna say that, but you're right. I will show it as I say it. Okay, so beginner, grade school type of lines, kind of what we use in our class. It can be used with any pen that we use, pencils, crayola, and again, that depends on how big. There obviously are some of these grade school lines that you can find double. So then that's when you would pull out your large Tombows. The large Tombows will be great for these. Our large grid and slant here. And then you have the small grid and slant. And then our smaller Tombows would work for that.
Yeah, so Tombow is a brand name, by the way.
Yes, and then we'll go over our supply recommendations on our next page. Another way to get guidelines is to create your own. Get a lined piece of paper, get a ruler, and get some pencil. Depending on how big of a pen you're gonna use. If you're using a small brush pen, like this one, you would just use one line for an X height, or if you're gonna use a large brush pen, you would wanna use about 2 or maybe even 3 lines for your X height. So it just all depends on what you're using, and using a ruler, a lined paper for that. Next, we have our dot grid. And with the dot grid, it's pretty much the same thing. You would just find what size you're looking for and then go from there. Just again, depending how big of a brush tip you're using. And it always starts at the X height. So once you form your X height, you work from there and you figure out where your ascending height. Okay, that's another thing. If you're gonna use 3 lines because you decide to use either a large flexible brush pen or a crayola, if your X height is 3 lines high, you're gonna wanna go 3 lines high above for your ascender and 3 lines below to your descender. Same thing. Medium size, 2 on the X, 2 up, 2 below, and then here, since it's a very small pen, 1 above and 1 below. I'm gonna have to brighten this so we can add a bright one to the packet, because I don't know if everybody had some missing lines in their packet.
Yeah, I will have to fix that. I did do the density more, but I think that just depending on everybody's printer, how it.
For sure. Yeah, okay. So next we have page 7. Just some quick tips to help you practice. You want to be consistent with your letter sizing. You don't want to do loops, ovals, and then your next oval not as uniformed as your previous oval. So staying consistent with your letter size, and that also goes for your height. So every time you have an H or a T, you don't want to go too high or too tall. You want to stay consistent with the size all across. Choose an angle, like I mentioned in the guidelines. Either you're going to go with up and down or at a slant and stick with it for your project. Just for that project, you could switch it up every time you do something new. The letter spacing should always be the same. So you, again, want to keep the distance approximately the same and not space it out too much down the road, down the letter. Use guidelines. Create lines with ruler and graph paper. I mentioned on page 6. Lift your pen after every stroke. Practice entrance and exit strokes while doing your alphabet drills, or anytime you're just going to practice alphabets anywhere. Use wrist, arm, shoulder movements if you're having trouble getting the letters to look the way you want them. You might have to just move your whole arm or your whole entire wrist just to get a consistent calligraphy. Highly recommend doing rows and rows of basic strokes, rows and rows of alphabets, and doing rows and rows of your alphabet drills. Try different writing tools, and then practice, practice, practice. It helps with muscle memory and eventually will help with shakiness. Recommendations. We have our Rhodia notepad. It comes in dot, graph, and line paper. We recommend HP premium paper. That is smooth paper. Any smooth paper prevents your brush tips from fraying. You don't want to go buy a nice pack of pens, then go and use it on a rough, regular printer paper. It will happen. Sometimes you have to use it, but over time, it's definitely going to break down the tip of your brush tip. Keep it from fraying. Brush pens. We have the Tombow, which is here, our Tombow Fudanusku. It actually comes, I don't have the other one on me, but it comes in a green, I do have it here, a green and a blue barrel. Usually you'll find them in a pack of 2. It's hard to tell them apart, but when they're in person, you'll be able to see that the blue barrel, there's a blue one, which is the hard tip, and then the green body is a softer tip. Another pen we recommend is a Tombow Dual. Has a flexible tip at one end and a bullet point at the other end. These are a lot harder to work with because they're extremely flexible, but they are good pens. It wouldn't hurt to start with those alongside your Crayolas. There's another brand called Pentel signed brush tips. Those are a small tip. And then another brand called Kelly Creates. Those come in large and small. If you were looking into dip pens, we recommend the brand's Manuscript. It's a Manuscript turquoise dip pen, and you would have to get the pointed nibs separately. We recommend Nikki G. Is it supposed to be Nikki or Nico? I need to look into that.
It's Nico.
Nico,
I guess.
Okay, and then there's another one. If you don't like the pointed pen, if it doesn't work for you, Oblique. It's called, yeah, the Oblique Pen Holder. That means the pen is off to the side. So here's the pointed pen. You would put the nib here, and this is the oblique where you put the nib off. I personally prefer this only because I can actually see what I'm doing. Personal preference, not so much here, but they both work great, and everybody can find their own. The ink that you would dip the nibs into, Dr. P.H. Martin has a ink, but basically you would just look for anything that says India ink. Watercolor, you can use a Pentel Aquash water brush pen is one where you would just fill up with water. So you would fill it up with water, dip it into your watercolor paint and use it that way. Or there's even pre-filled water brush pens. That's actually what I did with my mom project. I showed that briefly. Or you can actually use a small paintbrush. So if you use a Pentel Aquash, those are a lot bigger strokes. And then if you want a smaller, like a small Tombow, you would use the small paintbrushes. And then other ones, Crayola has brush pens, but also recommend using their classic Crayola for full calligraphy projects. Sharpie as well. They use a classic Sharpie, classic oil pens. I know some people have the oil pens, so we recommend these for projects, wood projects, anything with the hard surface that you want a permanent project. They also have brush pens and Sharpie brand using chalk on chalkboards, chalk projects. They also have chalk markers, different types, and also having pencil of any kind, drafting pencil, some eraser or gum eraser, and a ruler during all these projects. And then after our supply recommendations, this is only here just for a reference. Like I mentioned before, page 8, with the copper plate calligraphy, it's just a whole new class. Maybe that's something we might have to talk about, Debbie. Maybe a strictly copper plate uppercase class, because again, it's all new rules outside of the lowercase alphabet. So here I teach lowercase calligraphy. When it comes to uppercase copper plate, depending on what project you do, you're not always going to go towards copper plate. You might just find yourself using a classic cursive uppercase, or using lowercase but making it a lot larger to look like an uppercase. So there's just so many different ways calligraphy could be formed. And copper plate itself just has its own rules. But we would like to add this to the packet for a reference guide. If you would like to trace it and kind of practice the whole alphabet on your own time. And what's kind of cool about this, it shows you. Every time I do my worksheets, I actually work off of these, this alphabet page specifically. And that is it for my beginning calligraphy class. Do I have any questions, or would anybody like to show their work when class is over?
Okay. Well, thanks, Rachel, for teaching us the beginnings. And I like your projects today. I think they're very basic, but they'll also be able to be used right away for everybody who attended today. So I think they're perfect projects for beginning calligraphy. So thanks, everybody.